Hi everyone, welcome to the Setup and Installation lecture. So the objectives for this lecture are to install Python with Anaconda, download the zip file of notebooks that comes with this course, and then to open Jupyter and explore the notebooks and make sure everything is working for you. So just right off the bat, what is Anaconda? Anaconda is a distribution of Python. When we say distribution, that means it's actually not just including Python, but it's also including lots of libraries and tools that we use in this course. And it also includes its own virtual environment system, which we talk about later on in this course. It's essentially an all-in-one install that's extremely popular in data science and machine learning. So if you ever take any other training in data science and machine learning, such as a corporate training, it's highly likely that they'll also ask you to install Anaconda. So it's extremely popular in data science and machine learning, which is why we're using it in this course. So once we install Anaconda and get Python up and running, it's actually going to come with a development environment called Jupyter. And Jupyter is a development environment where we can write normal Python code, but what's really cool about it is it also allows us to display images and then write down markdown notes all within the same notebook. So it's a really great learning tool, and it's a great teaching tool as well, which is why I use it throughout this course. And it's also one of the most popular development environments in data science for exploring and analyzing data. And as you learn more and more about the course and the libraries, then you'll see why it's such a popular tool, because you get to see everything on a single screen. You get to see the images, your data, the sheets, etc., all in one window. Now, I want to make it clear, if you're an experienced Python user and maybe you've tried Jupyter but really didn't like it, you have your own setup like Sublime Text or PyCharm or any other sort of environment, please feel free to use any development environment you prefer. Sometimes some students just don't like Jupyter and they like their own thing. That's totally fine. We're not forcing you to use Jupyter. The Python code we're going to show throughout the course works in any environment. So I just want to be clear, please choose any development environment you prefer. But if you're totally new to this, I would highly recommend you go with the Anaconda and Jupyter setup we show here. That way you can follow along with this course, and I hope you learn to love it as much as I do. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to download Anaconda. Go ahead and go to www.anaconda.com, or just simply Google search Anaconda Python download, and we should end up at the same page. I'm going to go ahead and jump to anaconda.com in my browser now. All right, here I am at anaconda.com. Keep in mind, anaconda.com, this page actually updates itself quite frequently, so the style may change, and you may see different things. For example, right now, they're going to have an AnacondaCon, so the style of the page looks a little different, and the buttons may be, or the overall look of the page may be different for you when you actually visit this. But essentially what we're looking for is the download section. And you'll see some products here, why Anaconda, but somewhere on this page, you should see download. And if you're having trouble finding that, you can just go ahead and Google search Anaconda download, and it should eventually take you to this page. So what we see here is the download for Python 3 and Python 2. This course uses the latest version of Python 3, so we'll go ahead and use that for our installer. The one thing you need to make sure is that you select the correct installer for your operating system. So right now, I'm on a Windows computer, so I will choose the Windows installer for Anaconda. Now, if you're on Mac OS, go ahead and choose the Mac OS installer. If you're on Linux, go ahead and choose the Linux installer. Something you should note out is for Mac OS, there's a graphical installer and then a command line installer. The graphical installer is a lot easier to use. It basically has a little window that pops up and tells you what to do as you go along. So I would recommend the graphical installer. So I'll go ahead and, since I'm on a Windows computer, download the Windows installer for the Python 3 version. If you're watching this at some point in the future and Python 3.8 has come out, that's totally okay too. Basically, just be using Python 3. All right, once that's finished downloading, we'll go ahead and open up this executable file. If you're on Mac OS, it's going to probably be some DMG file or something that essentially walks you through the graphical installer. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And then you should see essentially the setup wizard jump out for you. So we'll go ahead and click next here. And then there's a license agreement. Go ahead and agree to it. And then there's the install for just me and all users. If you're on a work computer, you probably don't have admin privileges. So we'll just go ahead and install it for just me. Essentially, that means you have to log into your user account, and it'll only work for this particular user account. So go ahead and click next. Go ahead and choose the default location for the destination folder. And then if you're on a Windows computer, you'll see this option for advanced installation options, and you should actually check both of these boxes. One of them says that it's actually not recommended of adding Anaconda to your path environment variable. The reason they say that's not recommended is because if you have different versions of Python, that may mess around and make Anaconda the essentially default version of Python in your computer, and also the default way of running certain actions at your command line. I actually do recommend that, especially if you're already have a previous installation of Python. Now, if you're an advanced user and you understand what it means to set a path environment variable, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you want to add Anaconda to your path. However, if you're brand new and you don't know what adding something to your path environment variable means, then definitely go ahead and select this. Even if it says not recommended, go ahead and check both boxes. That's going to allow you to create virtual environments at the command line, which is very useful. So then, once you've done that, go ahead and select Install. All right, now that that has finished installing, we should be able to search for the Anaconda Navigator on our computer. If you begin searching for Anaconda on your computer, you should see a couple of options show up. One is the Anaconda prompt, and the other is the Anaconda Navigator. Go ahead and click open the Anaconda Navigator. Upon the Anaconda Navigator opening, you should see a bunch of applications show up. And essentially, this is a really convenient way of opening up your development environments. And you'll notice that Anaconda actually comes with several development environments already included. It comes with Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook, Spider, Qt Console, and more. The one we're going to be using in this course is the Jupyter Notebook. Keep in mind there's a Jupyter Lab, which looks really similar, but we'll actually be using a Jupyter Notebook. And as I keep mentioning, you're free to use any development environment you choose. But we'll be using Jupyter Notebook, so what we want to do is go ahead and launch Jupyter Notebook. So click here where it says Launch, and then what's going to happen is you should see a browser window pop up, and here we can see that Jupyter Notebook has automatically opened up in your browser. Now, if you don't have Google Chrome as your default browser, I would highly recommend you do use it because that is usually what works best with Jupyter. Don't use an older browser like Internet Explorer. Microsoft Edge should be fine, but Internet Explorer, that's actually not even supported by Microsoft anymore. So I would highly recommend using Google Chrome for the Jupyter. You can also use things like Firefox and Mozilla. Those should technically all work fine as well. Okay, so you notice that Jupyter opens in your browser. Something I want to clarify is that you do not need to be connected to the internet in order for Jupyter to work. It's merely using your browser as a graphical interface window. It's not actually connecting to the internet here. So you'll notice that I basically see all the folders that are on my computer. I can see my desktop folders, my documents, and my downloads. So what I want to do is download the zip file of notebooks that comes along with this course and then access them through Jupyter. So let's go ahead and download that zip file. Okay, so if you go to the actual course content page, you'll see the curriculum laid out, and you should notice under section 1, course introduction, in the third lecture, course FAQs, there's a zip file here that you can download. And as you were reading that lecture, you should have seen a little resource article point out that there's a resource there to download. Now keep in mind, if you're viewing a lecture video, so for example here, I'm viewing essentially our intro, environment setup, and installation lecture. If you click over here on the top left, it should also be an indication that resources can be downloaded, and you can then see the course content and click on this zip file and it will download the zip file. So go ahead and download the zip file either from course FAQs, and I've placed the zip file in a couple of other lectures in case you missed it, including this one and the Jupyter Notebooks lecture. It's the same zip file, it's just there for you to download. And go ahead and download it, and remember where you downloaded it, and then unzip that file. So right now, my version is underneath my downloads folder, so I'm going to go unzip it. Alright, so underneath my downloads folder, I'll go ahead and unzip this. You should be able to see extract all, or if you can download a program like WinRAR or 7-zip, go ahead and do that. Really just any way, whatever the typical method you use for unzipping folders, go ahead and do that. Windows and Mac OS have a default, so go ahead and just extract everything and unzip it. So let that unzip. And then once that's unzipped, you should see a folder here, and you'll see something that says refactored. Go ahead and click on that, and you'll see all the course notes organized in order that they are in the course. And if you then double click on these, you'll see a bunch of files called IPYNB files. Now the thing about these files, if you were to try to double click on them and open them directly, that wouldn't work. They actually need to be opened directly through the Jupyter Notebook system. So now that we know that our unzipped folder is underneath downloads, we're going to go back to our browser where we had the Jupyter Notebook and open the files that way. So let me go ahead and jump back to that. So here I am back at Jupyter Notebook. Go ahead and find your downloads folder. and then find the folder PyDSML Bootcamp Master, go to the refactored, and then you'll see all the files here. And the first ones we're going to be going over, they're all in order, is Python Crash Course. And then these notebooks, you simply click on them, and then once there's done loading, you can see all the information here. And later on, we'll talk more details about how you can actually run the Jupyter notebooks. Keep in mind that previously when I was filming this course, we didn't have it organized in a numerical fashion like this. We just had it organized by general topic, but now we've reorganized and refactored the actual notebooks and folders so that it's a lot clearer. You do 1 first, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and so on. Okay, so that's basically it for our setup. You should now be able to run Jupyter Notebook, and you should have installed Anaconda and then downloaded the notes and follow along. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Jupyter Notebooks lecture. In this lecture, we'll be showing you how to effectively use the Jupyter Notebook system and giving you a tour of the overall environment. Also, check out the resources for this lecture in order to download the zip file that contains all the notebook files. So as I mentioned, check the resources for this lecture and download the zip file. It contains all the .ipynb files, those are notebook files, and those notebooks for the rest of this course. Make sure you remember where you saved and unzipped that file. Let's go ahead and explore the notebooks as well as get a feel for how to effectively use them. I'm going to go ahead and just remind you how you can open up a Jupyter notebook. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the command prompt now. Alright, here I am at my command prompt. As a reminder, if you're using Mac OS, go ahead and just use your terminal for this. If you're using Windows, just go ahead and come over here to start and type in CMD and select your command prompt. There's also an Anaconda command prompt. You can use that as well. That's the command prompt that comes with the Anaconda distribution. Alright, so you'll go ahead and come to this command prompt and then type in jupyter space notebook and hit enter. Keep in mind, this is going to start a Jupyter notebook wherever you are in the command prompt. So for instance, let me go ahead and delete this real quick. I am under C users and then my middle name here, Marcial, and that's where my notebook is going to get started. If I want to start my notebooks in another directory, I need to change directory. The way I can change directory is by using CD and then typing in the next file that I want. So let's say I wanted to go to my downloads folder because that's where I downloaded the zip file. I could start typing in DON, and you can actually tab autocomplete this, and then it should take you to, if you go ahead and click enter now, downloads. And then I could type in Jupyter Notebook, hit enter and run this, and now my Jupyter Notebook file is going to be, when I show it in my browser, under the downloads folder. If you want to go ahead and go back up one folder, you can type in CD, that's change directory, space, dot, dot. And that will take you back up one directory. You can go ahead and just look up basic command prompt lines. They're a little different depending if you're using Mac OS or Windows. For instance, if you want to see old directory folders in your current directory, in Windows that's dir to see directory, and this basically shows you all the files here in your current directory. If you are on Mac, you can type in ls for list all of them. Alright, then to clear everything you have here, if you're on a Windows, you can just type in cls. If you're on a Mac, you can type in the word clear. Let me go ahead and start the Jupyter Notebook. I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to open up a Jupyter Notebook in my browser. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and find where I actually saved the unzipped file. Here it is, Python Data Science Machine Learning Bootcamp, and depending on what unzip program you used, you may or may not have this -master at the end. But if you go ahead and click on this folder, you'll see quite a few folders here. Python for data analysis, Python for data visualization, Python Crash Course, machine learning sections, data capstone projects, big data and Spark, and more. The very first section is under this folder, Python Crash Course. If you click on that section, or that folder, you'll have the notebook. And here you see the .ipynb files. So pretty much for every lecture where you see me coding something out, there's a folder that has the overall section name, and then there'll be a subfolder of the actual section name, and then the notebook files which correspond to the lecture names. So the very first one is Python Crash Course. You can go ahead and click on this. It'll take a little time to load. Here it is. And then everything I'll be typing out throughout the lecture is here for you. And pretty much at the beginning of every section of the course, I'll remind you on where you can find the actual notebooks for that section of the course. Since there's quite a few lectures and it may be hard to find it sometimes, I'll be there to guide you. And if you ever have any questions on where to find things, just feel free to post to the Q&A forums and I'll be happy to help you out there. Alright, then after that we'll start Python for data analysis. You'll start the NumPy section, so you'll click on NumPy and see the notebooks for that. Let me go ahead and just walk through how the Jupyter Notebook system works in a general sense. I'm going to go all the way back up to the master, and then I'm going to click New, and here, since I have kind of several environments, I'm just going to click this one, but you can click Python root or Python 3. Whatever it says, just go ahead and click on it. It should be fine. Again, you can just click New. Whatever it says under Notebooks, you should be fine to click on it. You'll get something like this. To retitle this notebook, you can just click here under the Untitled section and name it whatever you want. My Notebook, for instance, click OK, and it'll name it. Let me go ahead and show you the basics. This is a code cell, which means I can type in Python code into the cell and then run it. As a very basic example, I can say print hello, and then I can run this cell by clicking here on Run, and it will go ahead and run and show me the output below the cell. I can also do the same thing for basically any Python code. If I wanted to know what 1 plus 1 is, I just click Run here, and it shows me the output in the cell. Notice since I printed the output here, it didn't show out. Since I didn't actually specify to print the output, it showed it output cell. So if I actually said print 1 plus 1, then it wouldn't show that little out. Okay, so you don't always have to come up here and click this run cell. What you can do is actually just do Shift Enter. And that's, let me put it as a string, Shift Enter. And if I do Shift Enter, it will go ahead and run whatever is in that cell. So keep that in mind. That's a really nice way to just run stuff quickly so you don't have to constantly come over here and click Run Cell. Another little trick is Alt Enter. If I do Shift Enter on this, it just goes down to the next cell. But if I do Alt Enter, it will actually insert a cell below it as well. So notice the difference here. If I just do Shift Enter on this first cell, it runs it. And notice how the N changes its number to show you the order of stuff and how it's been run. Then if I do Alt Enter, it actually inputs a cell for me. That's a really nice trick, and I'll show you why later on when we discuss exercises. Okay, now you may be wondering, how can I save this notebook? You can just either do Control-S or click here on the little floppy disk, Save, and it actually has an autosave feature, so around every 2 minutes it will autosave, or you can just say File, and you can do a save and checkpoint here. Now you may also be wondering, how do I download this notebook as something else? Well, you can just go to File, Download As, and you actually have a bunch of options here to download. If you just want the .py file, you can just say download as a .py, and it will download and convert this notebook file into a .py file so you can use it as a normal Python script in whatever IDE you want. Or if you just want the HTML notes, you can click here on HTML, and it will export it to a basic HTML file that any browser can show. So you have a bunch of options there. You can go ahead and check them out. Something else I want you to know is if you ever have, for instance, an infinite while loop running, so let's just say this is like running forever and you want to somehow restart your kernel, what will happen is under this in, let me zoom in a bit, instead of a number here in in, you'll see a little asterisk and it'll just be running forever. What you can do is just go ahead and say kernel and then restart the kernel. And it'll say, do you want to restart the kernel? You go ahead and restart. It'll say restarting kernel, and then it'll say kernel ready. Basically what happens is this notebook is connected to a kernel, and a kernel is kind of just an instance of Python running. And if something's wrong where Python is crashing, maybe you accidentally wrote a script that just infinitely loops or takes a really long time, you can always just stop everything by coming over to kernel and clicking restart. You can also interrupt if you just want to interrupt that specific cell, but sometimes it doesn't work if you did a really bad while loop that runs forever. Just keep that in mind. Okay, if you ever need help in addition to everything I just told you here, you can always just click help, and then it'll give you help on a lot of the libraries we're going to be working with, as well as just notebook help. You can click on that and it'll send you to a link where it tells you about the notebooks themselves. Keep in mind these notebooks used to be called IPython notebooks, but now since Jupyter can run other languages such as Julia and R, they're called the Jupyter notebooks now. Another thing I wanted to mention is there's more keyboard shortcuts than what I just told you. You can go to Help, click on Keyboard Shortcuts, and it will give you a list of all the keyboard shortcuts that are available to you. Alright, that's really the basics of the notebook and pretty much all you need to know as far as you go through this course. If you have any questions that are more specific to a particular topic that you can't find under the Help here, go ahead and search the Q&A forums. If you can't find it there or in the FAQ, feel free to post a new question to the Q&A forums and I'll be happy to help you out. Real quick, I wanted to show you what exercises look like throughout this course. So for instance, let's say you go to Python for data analysis, you're on the NumPy section of the course, you've done the lectures, and you're ready to begin the exercise. Every exercise will have a solutions file associated with it. Don't check out the solutions file first, you should check out this exercise file. Then you can go ahead and click on this exercise file, and this one will pop up and look something like this. And this exercise file will have questions for you, and then a cell where you can go ahead and answer those questions. And a lot of times it'll also show you the expected output. So for instance, here we want to create an array of zeros. Now I know you probably don't know how to do that yet, but keep in mind that if you start typing stuff in this cell, such as print hello, and run this, it will overwrite the output. So just keep that in mind, and that will be more relevant when you actually get to the exercises. Something you may be wondering is, what kind of cell is this that actually just shows text and isn't a code cell? Well, this is known as a markdown cell. If we go ahead and go back to my notebook here, everything I've shown you so far is a code cell. But what's really awesome about Jupyter Notebooks is you can type in notes for yourself in normal markdown text. So you can come over here, click on Code, click on Markdown, and it will convert this into a markdown cell. And now if I run this cell, it's essentially just basic text for me to type notes for myself, which is really useful when you're learning. You can say something like, use print to print strings, run that. That's a little note for yourself, and then you can go ahead and type in print hello, etc. And that's a really nice way to kind of take notes as you go along throughout the lectures. And this also supports Markdown formatting. So if you're familiar with Markdown formatting, such as how to use hashtags for bold, etc., or maybe do italics with just a couple of asterisks, or bullet points, or indentation for kind of code formatting, that's all supported in these Markdown cells. Now, we won't go over Markdown syntax because that could be a whole nother course, but just keep in mind if you ever see something like this, type Markdown in LaTeX, that says it's a Markdown cell. A common mistake sometimes beginners make is they'll accidentally convert this to a Markdown cell and then wonder, hey, why isn't my code running? If your code is ever not highlighted, it probably means that you're accidentally running a Markdown cell. If you want to change this Markdown cell back to a code cell, you just come up here and select Code. Then run this with a Shift-Enter, and you're good to go. Okay, so remember Shift-Enter runs a cell, and then Alt-Enter will run a cell and output a cell below it. So if you go ahead and click Alt-Enter here, so if I do, again, Alt-Enter, I'm inputting a new cell. Now, I'm just referring to what I'm actually doing on my keyboard, not what I'm typing in as a string. So again, 1 + 1, Shift-Enter, it runs it. 1 + 1, Alt-Enter, it keeps putting in new cells below it, which is really useful for exercises. So if you come back here to this exercise, notice I have this output array 11111. If I don't want to overwrite that, I can just click on this text or markdown cell, do Alt-Enter, and it gives me a little cell here for a buffer. So now I can print whatever I want, Shift-Enter, and it outputs test. Alright, don't worry if you didn't completely get all of that because we're going to review all this when we actually get to the exercises. Alright, that's basically all you need to know for the Jupyter Notebooks. If you have any questions, feel free to post them to Q&A forums, and I'll be happy to help you out. Just keep in mind that the Jupyter Notebook system will start wherever you were in your command prompt or your terminal. You'll need to change directory using CD if you want to run or save your notebooks in another place in your computer. Alright, thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next lecture. Hello everyone, and welcome to this optional lecture on Anaconda virtual environments. This is a bit of a more advanced topic on how to create virtual environments using the Anaconda distribution. You can go ahead and feel free to skip this topic if you're not interested in it. Let's go ahead and continue. Let's talk about what virtual environments are. Virtual environments allow you to set up a virtual installation of Python and libraries on your computer. That way, you can have multiple versions of Python or libraries and easily activate or deactivate these environments. Let's go ahead and see some examples of why you may want to do this. For instance, maybe sometimes you want to program in different versions of a library. For example, you may have developed a full program that uses scikit-learn version 0.17, and then at some point in time the next version, 0.18, is released. Maybe you want to explore the new features of 0.18, but don't want to break any of your old code when you upgrade. This is where you may want to create a virtual environment for that specific version of the library. Another example is sometimes you'll want to make sure your library installations are in the correct location. So for example, you may want also multiple versions of Python on your computer. So you'll want to make sure a Python 2.7 version of a library is in the correct location versus a Python 3.5 version. What you can do with virtual environments is have one environment in Python 2.7 and another with Python 3.5. There is a virtual env library for normal Python distributions that has a lot of the capabilities that we're going to be going over with Anaconda. This virtual env library allows you to create virtual environments, and it's a virtual environment manager. Anaconda, however, which is the recommended distribution of Python that we use in this course, already has a nice built-in virtual environment manager that makes the whole process of creating a virtual environment, activating and deactivating them very easy. You can go ahead and check out the resource link for the official documentation that we're going to go over now. So go ahead and check out the resource link, which will take you to this URL, or if you want, you can manually type it in. We're just going to the official Conda PyData documentation where we talk about using environments. You can just click on the resource link if you don't want to type this entire file path or URL path in your browser. I'm going to go ahead and jump to my browser now, explore the documentation a little bit, and show you how you can use it at your command prompt. Let's go ahead and jump to that now. Okay, so here I am at the resource link for managing environments. What I want you to do is go ahead and go to create an environment, and you should see the basic instructions here for creating an environment. And it's pretty simple as far as the commands you need to put in. To create a new environment, you're going to go ahead and use the conda create command, followed by --name, then whatever name you want to call your new environment. In this example, they're calling their new environment snowflakes, and then space and a base package or library that you want to initiate that new environment with. If you don't put in a package here, you may get an error. So once you have this full command in your command prompt or your terminal, after of course installing Anaconda distribution of Python, Conda is going to ask you, do you want to proceed? You can type Y for yes. And then this creates a new environment called, in this case, snowflakes, that contains this program or package, BioPython. If you don't specify a specific version of Python, it will use your base version of Python, the one that you downloaded with Anaconda. But you can actually specify a specific version of Python, and we'll show you how to do that as well. Let me go ahead and jump to my command prompt, just put it on here, so I can walk you through these steps. Okay, so here's my command prompt. I will go ahead and create a virtual environment. We'll call it conda, we'll say conda space create first. Then I'm going to say --name for name. And let's go ahead and call this just a ridiculous name so we know we're actually doing something. We'll call it Fluffy. And then we need to put in a library to initiate it with. Let's go ahead and start off with NumPy, since that's going to be one of the first libraries we learn about. I hit enter. It'll fetch the package metadata. It'll get a list of what it needs to install, and it'll ask you if you want to proceed. Now I'll go ahead and say Y for yes. It will link certain packages together and then extract what it needs to extract. Okay, so that's done. Now to activate this environment, I can use activate Fluffy. To deactivate this environment, I use deactivate. Let me go ahead and show you what my base version of Python looks like versus this virtual environment version of Python. Remember, this virtual environment was only initiated with NumPy. So if I just type in Python right now, I will get my regular distribution of Anaconda, the one I installed. In this case, it's 2.7. So for example, if I go ahead and say import NumPy as NP, hit enter, that works fine. If I say import pandas as PD, hit enter, that also works fine. Let's go ahead and quit from this now. and I'm going to now activate my virtual environment, which was called Fluffy. And now you'll notice that in parentheses it says Fluffy, which lets me know that I'm actually inside this virtual environment of Fluffy. So if I say Python and hit enter, I get the same version of Python 2.7 that my base distribution was. But something interesting is going to happen when I try to import some stuff. If I import numpy as np, it imports no problem since I know that's what I activated my virtual environment with. If I say import pandas as pd, I get an import error, no module named pandas. The reason for that is because this virtual environment doesn't have pandas inside of it. If I want to actually make sure that this virtual environment also contains pandas, I will need to activate it, as I've done already, and then say conda install pandas here, or conda install whatever library you want, Jupyter, scikit-learn, matplotlib, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this. If I want to deactivate Fluffy and go back to just my original distribution of Python, I just say deactivate, hit enter, and it deactivates that virtual environment. Now another active use case for virtual environments is to create an environment that uses a different version of Python. You can do that simply by saying conda create, we'll go ahead and say --name. You can also just say -n, single -n, but we'll show the full thing, --name. Say the name of the virtual environment you want. We'll go ahead and call this virtual environment my Python 3 version, space, and then you say Python equals 3.5, and here you have the option of just putting in a single library, such as NumPy, or if you want the entire Anaconda distribution, you can type in Anaconda here. That takes quite a while longer, because remember that's the entire distribution of Anaconda, so we'll go ahead and just say NumPy. So what this is going to go ahead and do is say conda create this new virtual environment called my Python 3 version, space Python equals 3.5, NumPy, hit enter. It'll fetch the package metadata again, but remember it's going to do all of this with Python 3. I'll go ahead and say Y for yes. It'll fetch the packages, go ahead and install them. I'm going to now jump to the finish of the extraction and installation. And now it is complete. Let's go ahead and show just typing in Python. I have Python 2.7 here. That's my base distribution. I'm going to go ahead and quit that. Now let's go ahead and check out my environments. I can say conda space info --envs, and this command will list out my environments. Here I have Fluffy, another example environment that I made earlier, my Python 3 version, Py3.5, which is another environment I have, and then my root version of Python. You can see there's a star to indicate that. So if you're opening up Jupyter Notebook and you see something like Python root, that's what it means. It's the root installation of Python. Let's go ahead and activate my Python 3 version environment. Hit enter. You'll notice my Python 3 version. Now if I call Python inside of this virtual environment, note that I get Python 3.5. So if you're able to actually specify that you want a different version of Python by saying Python equals and then whatever version number you want when you're creating that virtual environment. So if I do something like 1 divided by 2, I get 0.5, which is not the case for Python 2. Okay, so that's really all you need to know as far as creating virtual environments. The resource link has basically everything you would want to know, such as changing environments, cloning environments, removing environments, etc. It's pretty straightforward, so now that you know everything that we went over in this lecture, you can go ahead and reference the documentation as you need. Again, this is just an optional lecture in case you ever want to create your own virtual environments. I would suggest that you create virtual environments just to make sure that all your libraries are the versions that you want them to be. So if you want to continue on with this course, maybe go ahead and create a virtual environment called My Data Science or something like that. All right, hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I will see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody.